This is The Talent Show with your host, Joe Rooney.
It isn't merely that your fate depends on whether or not you get your act together and to what degree you decide that you're going to live out your own genuine being. It isn't only your fate. It's the fate of everyone that you're networked with.
Isn't that a beautiful thing? And it's appropriate. The show you're about to listen to, and welcome, by the way. Welcome to The Talent Show. I had a good conversation with my friend Christian, and the show that you're about to listen to was completely unplanned, unrehearsed. We wanted to talk about Christian's transition from the Broadway stage to his current position as CTO of a tech startup. But we ended up going down a completely different route. I decided to begin the conversation with a curveball, see where it went, and I think it went a nice place where at least we had fun, and I hope you all enjoy our conversation, and I hope you enjoy this talent show. So, I was wondering if you've ever heard the name Balaji Srinivas.
That's how we're starting? No, I haven't heard that name.
Well, all right. So there's this thing called the pseudonym inus. He's combining anonymous and pseudonym and putting it together, right? I think I don't know exactly how he says it because I've only seen it written, but it's.
How do you spell this?
It's pseudonym.
No,
Onus.
Balaji
Srinivas. Yeah, Balaji was the CTO of Coinbase at their founding, co-founder and CTO, and he's kind of a big decentralization, crypto, all things decentralization and modern ways of kind of thinking of systems and institutions.
Right? It's funny that you say that because you're asking if I knew who Balaji Srinivas or Srinivasan was, but I'm at the same time I'm on Coinbase.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, he's got this thing called the pseudonymous or pseudonymous economy that's developing, and the thought is you could be in the world now with social media, fully real, your real identity, right? That's one way, and then that's like Facebook and LinkedIn. And then you have things like 4chan where you're anonymous, right? There's just no reality there. Even Reddit's kind of like that, right?
Yeah.
All anonymous. And then you have this middle ground where you're not really anonymous, but you're not really a pseudonym. You're kind of this middle ground where you're kind of playing both sides of the fence. Under a pseudonym, but not totally anonymous to the fact that it's this weird ground. And if you can figure out how to play in that ground, you're tapping into kind of the way things are going. And I talk to you about the talent economy all the time. So I was wondering if somebody that's much more credible than me, Balaji, would add credibility to the talent economy theory. So I didn't know if you knew of him.
I didn't. I do know of Coinbase. I was just, looked up his name. I was on his wiki right now. So you're saying, I've actually, that side of the internet with the 4chan and then 8chan and the whole thing with Q. I watched the documentary on HBO. It was so interesting because I'm on the computer all day long, like at least 10 hours a day. I mean, it's on there. Like I walk away from it, but I come back, but I'm usually connected when I'm in my work cycle. On average, I'd say 10 hours a day, but that whole side of the web, I know nothing about. And I'm like, I was just astounded to think that, there's like a parallel universe of the internet out there, what people are doing online. So yeah, I don't, What you're talking about now in this like pseudonymous is where you're like
I think you
kind
got
of
it better than, yeah, I think you said it better than I did.
yeah, I don't really know, but I mean there's definitely like a following, there's an audience for this. um like I am on Reddit. I do use Reddit. I use it as a source of information, more like a crowdsourced um uh site. And also like what's the information site where you just search a question, it shows up, like, I think it's called Quora.
Quora.
Quora, yeah. Like pretty much trust nothing that's the answer on Quora is what I
Yeah.
if that shows up first, I'm like, okay. I might have to do a little bit more research before I just like take this as truth and move on. But yeah, I mean, this crowdsourced information like definitely has a place on the internet. So I do use it with Reddit quite a bit, but you have to like sift through a lot of crap to find the answer that you're looking for. And I do think what he's talking about with this pseudonymous like has to be where there is more accountability, where you're not like fully anonymous and just posting things as truth. Like there is a place for that, and I think there's a yearning for it. I don't. You talking about it right now is the first time I've ever like really heard of it, but it's super interesting.
You're the one talking about it. I mean, I haven't said much at all, but the talent, so I've been talking about it, and Magda's telling me it's, I'm totally plagiarizing, but I'm coming at it from my angle, right? You've said that you are not on that side of the internet. Guess who isn't either? Me, right? I know Balaji from the name of somebody who's a lot more popular, right? A lot more mainstream. And then it trickles in. So that's why connection's important, exposing yourself to multiple things and new things, right? Because you never know where that connection is going to lead you. I wasn't looking to get on the weird side of the internet. And Balaji, I don't think
I
is
wasn't
considered
accusing you of
weird.
that, no.
No, but you opened up that that is a different side of the internet, right? Where they're exploring, kind of far out there ideas, but they are grounded in, the reality that you're experiencing, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's something. When I talk about the talent economy, I think there's it speaks to that yearning, or that, maybe the word seeking or searching, right? People are looking for a way to assert themselves more and more, and there's opportunities in social media, right? So you might not want to be, you might not want to have your face and name be the front of something, but a slice of your personality can be the front of something, with just, the name and face changed a little bit. So it's almost all you. It's just a pseudonym on top of it, but there's nothing anonymous about your actions. And then, you can reach out somewhere, just toggle from profile A to profile B. And then there you are. You can spend the next pocket of time. Is it a half hour? Is it 45 minutes? Pushing out some content,
I like the
working
idea.
on, yeah, go.
See, okay, so the anonymity gives you a certain level of freedom. Well, actually, quite a lot of freedom on the internet to say what you think, to be yourself, to be uncensored. And this goes back to not just the internet. I mean, this goes back to like medieval times with Punch and Judy shows, like puppeteers. Like you can get away with a lot more when those words come out of the puppet's mouth rather than your mouth. You're probably you can put on a show for the king and the queen maybe without getting decapitated by using a puppet to make it funny. And like we've seen that through animation and cartoons and cranky actors like making phone calls on Comedy Central. And yeah, I mean, I think it's the same thing on the internet with like QAnon, or not necessarily just QAnon, but any of these anonymous sites where you don't really have to have any kind of public facing information. But like the whole thing with crowdsourced information online, I remember distinctly the first time I found value in it. It was on Twitter. I was relatively new to Twitter, and honestly, Twitter was relatively new to the internet. I was in Brooklyn at the time, and there was like a fighter jet that was flying over Manhattan, and I was like, "Whoa, what's that about?" So I just went on Twitter on my phone. I searched for like fighter jet Manhattan, and there were all these like posts happening in real time, live. It was like, "Oh yeah, Air Force One is coming into town. It's going to be flying over. They're just like securing the airspace. Nothing to worry about." I mean, because anytime you see a plane flying that low over Manhattan, it's like, red light. So yeah, I was like, wow, the speed of this is unbelievable. Just like access to real time information and news, and also like the ability to just cut out the media, like because it's right from a real person in real time. Like my mind was blown, and I thought this thing is powerful.
Yeah, it is. And it's really just starting, right? Like I followed all the events of the last year, call it last summer, in these crowdsourced arenas. And
Mhm.
I just knew, I was picking up information light years ahead of people, and information that people never picked up, right? And it's a different way to consume, right? It's that you called it crowdsourcing. I never think of crowdsourcing too much. I just think of it as digital. I think of it as, I don't know what I think. I just think of it as an extension of a network, right? Just more nodes out there.
Right. Well, okay. If you think of it as nodes, I think of it as like the hive mind. You know, yeah. I've always liked that saying, and the term, thinking of us as like just a bunch of bees all operating together, that we don't even know how our individual actions are contributing to the whole, but they are. So when people put a question out there and ask the hive mind, like, see what you come up with, I think the results are sometimes pretty astounding.
Yeah, I mean, so it's when you ask the hive mind, you'll get disparate results. And I think you'll find those results are often, and when I mean often, always predicated by the inputs. So people are searching for, let's just call it information. We're consumers, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're going to get it through our networks. Traditionally, the networks were pretty limited to our 150, 200 person social sphere, and a handful that we consume through the TV and radio. Now we still have these dinosaur legacy networks that we call the mainstream media today, the things that we've carried from Walter Cronkite forward. But then we also have millions and billions and unlimited different variations of networks out there that we can bring into our lives. And how do we bring them into our lives? Right? There's out in reality where we're limited to what we can experience in an analog situation. That's why we had the 150, 250 people limit. The limit now is infinity, literally, right? And whether you like it or not, that's your exposure, right? So when you start tapping into things that aren't analog, you're going to start tapping into the unlimited, and the unlimited contains a lot. And if you're not careful with what you bring in, you're going to have an experience that's curated by somebody else, not you. So I think to the point of that, right? People are crowdsourcing like as a mode of being and as a way of consuming and programming, how they view reality. And maybe they're not being as conscious of what they're putting in there, right? We have a lot of choice. And when you talk about the hive mind, what I immediately went to was, if I'm operating in a hive mind and I realize intuitively or as a forward thought that my actions and the actions of others are intricately connected, and what I do is of profound importance to everything around me, what I can see and what I can't see, I'm going to operate a lot differently, as opposed to, I'm on an island, I'm grabbing some information, and I'm going to kind of react to it based off my own instinct or just lack of forethought, right? So
like the Tom Joad of the internet, like at the end of the Grapes of Wrath, where he's like, "I'll be there everywhere."
Yeah, but
we get it. We are like all connected now, whether we want to be or not. I think fundamentally we're going to have to start changing the way we think about how we ingest information, because we're not meant to take this much in. We're just not as a species. We can't even process all of it. It's just like one thing after the other. With the news cycle and every screen that's in front of you all day long, it's just constant bombardment of information. And I think we're drawing conclusions too quickly when we're like, what I'm trying to think of a way to say this, like kind of what you were saying, like what the person on the island, right? Like okay, there's all this information out there that was like sourced from a crowd or a collective, but I'm trying to like make a determination as an individual out there without respect to the greater whole. And it's just it's like a universe that's too vast to even be able to comprehend for one person. Like I was trying to remember, we had this issue at work where we had some latency on the VoIP phones, and it was when we were talking to mobile clients in Australia.
Time out real quick for the lay people. Christian and I are speaking for the purposes of an audience today. I'll remind him. So for the lay people, VoIP is a slang term for a technical acronym, VoIP.
Yeah, but
voice over internet protocol. So you used to have Alexander Graham Bell patching you through the telephone lines. Then we were able, through the miracle of the internet, to provide these voice services over an internet protocol rather than whatever Alexander Graham Bell put together and the guy who actually invented the telephone technology before him.
Wasn't it like Antonio Angelucci or something? I don't even know his name.
So Christian had a problem with his voice over internet protocol. Go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, that's okay. I actually forgot that this was even that we weren't just talking. But we were having this issue. I mean, we're actually speaking on VoIP right now. I think a lot of people don't even realize when they're on Skype or having any kind of phone call that they're speaking on voice over IP. But anyway, we had this latency in the phone calls where it was like one-way audio issues. It was like a little bit choppy here and there, and we couldn't really figure out the problem. So we're changing codecs and troubleshooting it. We eventually got the problem resolved by switching to a different proxy server. But I was explaining this to one of my colleagues, and I said, he's like, "Why do you think it's only Australia?" I said, "Well, it is like the longest, subterranean or sub-oceanic transcontinental cable in the world. So there has to be some latency there." And he said, "Well, what do you mean?" And I was like, "Well, like the cable that runs from United States to Australia, like from Los Angeles to Sydney, there's like one under the ocean." And he's like, "No, there's not." I'm like, well, I mean, there's one from that connects Australia to like Hong Kong, and and we got to Seoul and the Philippines, and like there's a bunch of them at this point. And he's like, "Really?" I'm like, "What do you think? Where do you think this is? Like in the air? Like it just happens?" Like, no, like we're connected. Like the internet is like in no place. It's not one thing. Like we're connected by wire, but it's in no one place. And he was like, "Wow, my mind is like blown right now." And I think that's something I try to always come back to and remember, that the internet is like the universe. It's constantly expanding and growing and changing. It's an alive being. It's not one place, one thing that can be controlled. You can't control it. Sorry, that was a little out there.
No, it's an interesting. No, you had me thinking, right? So maybe it's time to change subjects because I don't want to go too deep into the theoretical, but it's fascinating for me to think about that connection part, right? And maybe we'll just highlight it there. There's a line to be drawn, and it's thick, and it's impenetrable, right? There's the analog world that you walk around in. And then there's the digital world.
Yeah, so okay,
think-
it all
okay,
happens through
go ahead.
modulation, right? Like
Okay,
we
go ahead.
we fundamentally, like we always talk about this digital world, but when it comes down to it, fundamentally, we're still connected by cable. It's whether it's fiber or copper, we still have a tether to one another. So as vast as the internet is and as abstract as it gets, it does have roots, which kind of gives me some hope.
That's a good connection, right? So I guess it isn't an impenetrable division, right? There are the roots there, and maybe that's how you start to bring it together. The division I was talking about, and maybe it was a wrong choice of words with you. By analog, I meant just a fun word for the tangible experience out there in the world, touching things. Before the internet, right?
I see.
And then this digital world is just completely different, and the dividing kind of the frame that divides the two are limited exposure to people, places, and things. And this new world is unlimited exposure to people's, places, and things and ideas, right? And throw that on both sides, the limit and the unlimit. Now, when you start to connect them, Christian, I think that's where the magic happens, right? Because connection is vital. You need to connect, right? You need to connect. You need to connect.
I think we're essentially talking about the same thing. Yeah, you're talking about analog, being tangible, things that you can go out there and touch. And for me, I'm just making this not an analogy, but more of this intangible thing of the internet. You can go back and find the roots to where it actually is tangible. Like when you go to a data center or a co-location center and you actually, see the servers that are running your cloud computing, you're like, wow, it's a real thing. Okay, it's like real. When I spin up an instance to run a website or something on Amazon Web Services, it's in a place. It's in Northern Virginia. It's
perfect.
It's somewhere. It's real.
So the connection is when you do something in the digital world, it's real. It might not feel real, right? Because you don't see the frown on the person's face when they miss your sarcasm, right? So it doesn't feel real. Right? It doesn't feel real because you weren't at the sporting event, right? You only clicked the like button, right? But it is real.
Yeah. Well, to circle back on this whole idea of anonymity on the internet, that's kind of what got us into this problem with cyberbullying, and people have this freedom to think, I'm just behind this screen. I can say whatever I want. I can be as rude or as mean as I want to another person. And then we had the first people like committing suicide because of being bullied online. Like that was never a thing, never existed before. I see all of these people on Twitter that's like, I'm devastated. My son just died. And I look at that, I'm like, oh my God, is that real? Is that person really reaching out here on a social media platform for like condolences? It's still astounding to me that this is where we are, that sometimes like these interpersonal connections have gone digital, and it only made it more evident during this pandemic, right? So
I think you and I talked about it yesterday. I wrote about it yesterday. I've been just smacked in the face by how important connections are, and I've been I've been stimulated by, I'm a person who's moved by connection. I just kind of take the connections and make them stronger where they need to be, break them where they need to be broken. That's been my life, right? Just driven by connections, very vital. And being immersed in something, you can forget about the importance. And we're all immersed in connections, right?
Well, I appreciate you for that very reason,
yeah.
because whenever you call me, I know you're like, what's going on? Want to connect? Let's catch up. Let's go for a hike. Let's go for a run. Let's do this. And not that I'm like adverse to that, but sometimes I get a little too comfortable in this like little dev nest of an office that I have, where I'm just like, in front of the computer.
Of course you are.
Yeah. I mean, I don't have that like natural inclination to get out there and connect with people. And the pandemic has only made that, a more exponential problem. But yeah, I really appreciate that you are the opposite.
Well, hey man, it takes two to tango, and if you're not willing to come out, and if you're not bringing anything valuable, I'm not going to call you. So I think you're the one to. I think you're the one to thank. But taking that just maybe a little step further in how vital it is to connect in my personal experience. At the end of the year, the beginning of the year, I threw out this thing that I was going to connect with 1 million people. Right. I was just overwhelmed with this desire to have a meaningful connection with people, and I wasn't trying to get 1,000 likes. I just wanted to connect with people. And I threw out that number 1 million, and I said it was going to happen. Right. And I didn't know, but it was going to happen. And people asked me how I was going to do it.
Yeah. How do you count that?
Well, let's just put it this way. I said, it will be known because there'll just be overwhelming evidence in the universe that it happened. Right. And then, life goes on.
Yeah.
Right?
I'm sure you've had to get into like a marketing term, I'm sure you've had view through conversions where you've connected with people and you've converted them and you have no idea. You have no attribution source.
Oh my God. Well, listen, everything you do is a ripple effect. We're in a hive, right? That's why you got me going down this path. So when I was getting my blood drawn in the first week of January, and the woman routinely takes me back and she sits me down, she didn't expect to have the waiting room fill up for 40 minutes while she poured her life story out on me. I didn't ask anything but a few questions. Literally a few dozen words, Christian, in 40 minutes. And I was able to understand and learn about this person's profession, what makes her special in it, and what she finds special about it, and what she's excited about for the next year, right? She was just so willing. And I think maybe there was a thirst, right? That need to connect with somebody and talk, because if she did that every day with everybody that, asked her just a couple questions, she probably wouldn't be employed in that lab facility for too long. Right. But we had a real connection, and I didn't show up to do anything but listen. I didn't want to participate with anything other than ears. And I was very intentional about if I felt the need to say something, to turn it into a question. I was able to do this for just a few days. It was very intense, Christian. I was out backing up lines at the grocery store, buying running shoes, pharmacy. So, it was a couple days, but it had a big impact on me. It had a really big impact on me. And, that was the analog experience of connection. And who knows the impact that happened from them, right? I talked to one woman at the grocery store. I was really hesitant just because of the way she looked to ask her, right? Because I was like, she's probably going to be miserable, right? Mm-hmm. She just looked kind of miserable, right? And I said, you know what, Joe? Just ask her the question. Hey, read her name tag. Something I always do. I always refer to people by name when they're serving me, if they have a name tag. Hey, I forget her, whatever, right? What's big for you this year? She looks at me. I finally stopped drinking. Okay. Well, geez. I didn't expect it to go there, Christian. I just opened up Pandora's box.
Yeah, apparently.
I was able to fight through the discomfort there because I had every opportunity to pack it in and say, sounds great, keep ringing. I'm going to step down here and bag. I stayed there. Unfortunately, it was between glass. There was that little separation, but we were able to look eye to eye. And we just this great conversation. She told me about some things. It wasn't as long as the at the lab facility, but who knows what happened from there, right? Like I gave her a little bit of encouragement, told her I pray for her, just really patted her on the back, and God, I hope that went and did something, right? Even if it was just one more day, right? Who knows, right? But that was the analog world, Christian, right?
Yeah, well,
so
I think
if everything you do is important and it's going to be tallied, whether you see it or not, right? The level of your effect is going to be tallied, right, on the positive negative scale. Were you a net benefit or a net deterrent to this person's success or just well-being, or this community's success or well-being? Little actions like that matter. They're real, seen or unseen. The effects happen. In the digital world, where your exposure is now unlimited and that connection to your action is available and unlimited and potentially will impact and can impact and is absolutely going to impact things as a ripple, right?
Okay, I have
anyway, you see what I'm saying there?
Yeah, I have two things to say about that. The first thing is that I think most people, regardless of the energy that they're putting out there, they're yearning to connect with other people in some way. And the other one is that I think it was really important that you said you used her name. A person once told me, or asked me, what's the most important word in the English language? And I said, I don't know what. And they said, Christian. And I was confused. And they said, or Joe. Joe's the most important word in the English language. And I still didn't get it. And I said, your name. Everyone loves hearing their own name. I was like, my God, that's true. Like that is so important. Like, because nobody calls you by your name. So you said her name and began that analog connection, and it went right to, I quit drinking. Like, it just opens doors.
It does. It does. Let's talk about opening doors a little bit, Christian. I know that you can softly open doors with a well-intentioned, connection. And you can also open doors with a well-intentioned ambition. And, one of the things I really I value in what I'm able to take away from our relationship is, this audacity of, and I learned this yesterday for the first time, right? Of going to somebody and saying, hey, not only can I do the things I've shown you over time, but here I'm going to show you a little bit more, and I'm actually going to show you a plan where I can take what I have demonstrated credibility and a reputation for being really good at, and with a little bit of help from you, investment, I can go ahead and up that by several factors and bring an overwhelming benefit to you so that you can spread your benefit and grow your influence. The difference, not the difference, the thing you did there is what I took away thinking this morning, and I was running this morning, I was thinking about that. And there's a difference between the evidence of what you can do and the execution of what you can do, right? And the execution doesn't need to be the finished product. The execution needs to be, you have the credibility to do it, and you also have the credibility to finish things. This all makes sense to me. Let's do it. Right. So going right to your point of connecting and the most important name, right?
Yeah.
Opening up a door for you. You may not have known it at the point, but you were in top persuader mode, right? You were in, world-class Tony Robbins, Zig Ziglar, 100% close rate situation. You were influencing in mind-blowing ways, and it was all very natural because you were doing something that was on path for you. So I don't know where you want to take that from there, my friend. We talked yesterday, and that was kind of a little breakdown I had. The evidence and execution.
It also helps to be out in nature too, right? Clears your mind, lets you find center. But like, to circle back on this whole idea that we began with, of now we're talking about making a real analog human connection with someone that's yearning to speak, that's yearning to get their ideas out there, and also just yearning to connect with you. A lot of that is lost in pseudonymous. So I really hope whoever is coming up with this idea, whether it's the CEO of Coinbase, is that they're going to bridge that gap.
Well, I think I'm just learning about it, okay? And I think the essence of it is you might change you might change your name and the avatar for safety reasons, right? Who knows? You might not want to upset your brother-in-law. Right. But it's something you could it's an opportunity that you can grab by the horns and wrestle to the ground and partition it and move on with another part of your life. Right. It doesn't have to interfere with everything else. Right.
If you told me back in 1998 that I would be having a conversation in 2021 about how to have more interpersonal relationships as avatars, I would have thought you were like a unicorn or something.
Well, it's happening whether you know it or not. If it's not to you, it's because you're smart. You realize the power of that already, right? But there's I'd venture to say millions of people on Twitter and the like selling guides, building YouTube channels with just their voice, right? But they're exploring topics of interest, right? Maybe they're an accountant, but they're doing, magic, card tricks with their hands all day, right? And they're building a following of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions, right? But for some reason, they got to be the buttoned up CFO, and, the goofster card trickster can't come out, or at least, that's what he's created for himself or herself, right? So why not go play in a little bit of anonymity, but it's still you, right? It's still you, because you love doing the card stuff, right? And this allows you to tap into that and have a net positive impact on thousands and millions of other people, right?
I think what I would like to see, if there were like
or is that bullshit? Tell me that's
I don't believe it. I don't believe it's bullshit. I would like to see the internet move in a direction where, regardless of this anonymity thing we're talking about now, just some sort of revamp of marketing agendas. And because right now, with return on ad spend campaigns and regurgitating things on the display network to people that didn't convert, you wind up being in a net space that is creating a microcosm, like a monolith, rather. You're in a silo of only the information that you put out is the only information you get back. And suddenly you're closed off from the rest of the world, the rest of the internet world. I'm sure we've all experienced this. You click on a friend on Facebook that you don't communicate with that often, and you kind of take this like path down a rabbit hole of friend to friend to friend, and you suddenly realize, holy shit, there's a whole other world out there that I'm closed off from, or at least, because of the marketing efforts of all of these companies out there that are making money off of showing me what I put out and just spitting it right back at me. I'm in a bubble, and the internet now is a series of bubbles where you're trapped, and you can't explore new ideas or find new information because you're cookied and your likes are known and targeted right back at you. So because everybody likes being right,
Yeah, everybody, listen, I've sat in on a lot of sales calls, okay, with a lot of other salespeople. And both me and the person on the other side of the table were both able to detect with the same, at the same time and with the same abilities, when my counterpart was genuinely there to engage and find out how they could be of value, and when they were sizing them up. Both techniques involve questioning. Both techniques involve many times the same exact questions, but what you say and how you say it is pretty much what people read, right? As opposed to what you say. And that's important. That's important. That's when people make decisions, right? And it's a very quick decision, and it's a lasting decision, right? So when you're confronted with these things, and you're able to see it, that's great. But when you're not able to see it, that's a problem. That's when they can sneak in. And next thing you know, rather than having somebody who was there to help build you up, you have somebody sucking you dry, while you're not looking. And, I'm not as the last person to want to paint salespeople in a bad light, even though I just did. That's everybody. We're humans, right? I don't care who you are. If your intentions in a connection, and I just happen to use a sales engagement as an example of a connection, any connection, if your intentions are to anything but to give, you're probably there to take, right? And if you're not there to
something.
Yeah, and listen, and if you're not there to give, you better be there to learn, right? And that's probably the only way you can avoid taking, right? So I agree with you. Marketing needs to change. The way we market needs to change, but I don't know. That's a big one, right? Because there's immediate result. You know what I mean? Like people want immediate results, right? If you're talking about big business, when you talk about marketing, I think business, right? So I don't know if we're going to, I don't know if we can count on any of these institutions to change it for us, because, they got pressures and demands that were due last month or last quarter that they need to meet.
Well, here's an analogy I think that will resonate with everyone, because we've all had this situation, is where you're texting someone. You have a thread, it's going back and forth. Miscommunication starts to happen. You both realize it. One person is getting perturbed, angry, whatever. And then you just say like, hey, I'm just going to call you. And you get on the phone and be like, it's just way easier to do over the phone. Like we're starting to get confused over text. It's like, yeah, I agree. And then you hash it out and you talk it out. It's like, oh, that's what you meant. Sorry. I literally read into what you sent me and I thought you meant something else. We need that to happen on the internet. And I don't know how that transpires.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one. And I think so kind of going full circle for me, I tried to segue into something else, but this is fun. So, people are consuming, they're searching, they're consumers, and there's two different types of networks. And this is what I see evolving, right? To address this, there needs to evolve two different types of networks. The mainstream network, which is your legacy, right? And I even think it includes your Facebooks, your major big tech social medias, right? Who are in a sense, big media corporations at this point, right? Akin to, the Foxes, the CNNs, and all these other acronyms, ABCs, NBCs. And then you have this other type of network, which is true network, right? So these are new concepts. right? So you have MSM Network and True Network. MSM Network is made up of network news, pop culture, and celebrities. Okay, when you consume that, you're being controlled. Your mind's being shaped. Okay, by those people, and that's the same thing with anything you do. Right, your mind's being shaped. But in this form, when you're kind of primarily consuming mainstream media, you're under mind control because that's because you're kind of taking somebody else's spoon-fed information.
Yeah.
Now, over on True Networks, right, which don't exist right now, but this is a 100% curated experience where I get immediate feedback, crowdsourcing from the people experiencing something. There's no intermediary. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
The culture is curated, right? So you're not going to get, you're never going to see twerking, when you open up YouTube. You're never going to see, any of that weird stuff they're trying to constantly throw, hypersexualized stuff,
Mm-hmm.
You're never going to see the sensational clickbaity stuff, right? All pop culture is curated, right? So think of, maybe you used to think Rolling Stone was kind of pop, so you went to the Village Voice, and if you really thought the Village Voice was too pop, you went to your local major university's literary department and bought their periodical, right?
Yeah.
And if you thought that was something else, there was an artist stapling together his or her periodical down the street, right? So, but people would curate, right? I mean, or in Philadelphia there was the Inquirer and the City Paper, right? It's that type of curation, right? You're either going to get one or the other. But it can be much more nuanced now that it's a true network, right? I can literally curate the individuals, right? And if I lump individuals into interest groups, I can grab the ones that are really true to me. It doesn't mean people aren't going to grab the lipstick glam ones that are, it doesn't mean the charlatans aren't going to be there, right? It doesn't mean there's not going to be people there that are there doing this master persuading and influencing, but there also is, and it's there real today, right? There are people out there, pushing stuff because somebody's got to fight the fight, and
I mean, I think what
for me, right?
I think what we
And
need
hold
to
on.
make this happen is trustworthy, reliable content aggregators. I've worked in New York as a network administrator for an architecture firm, and the CEO's other career that he started in was on Wall Street, but he was a news aggregator that just aggregated financial news. There's so much information coming out on the market. It was like, how could anybody possibly sift through that? So they take what they thought was important and relevant for the day out of multiple news sources, just on financial markets, and aggregate it into one nicely wrapped, neat package where you could say, here's your subscription fee, here's all the information, unbiased, it's from everywhere, so I'm not saying the original source is unbiased, but we aggregated it in an unbiased way. Excuse me. And here you go. I think, that's something that we're all trying to do now. Anybody that's looking for some sort of semblance of truth in media is, well, I don't just have to watch one network anymore. I can't just be spoon-fed this. I have to watch about a dozen of them and go out and find every piece of information. I have to go far left. I have to go far right, start hacking away and making my way towards center to find out what's true.
So I think that failed, Christian. I think that aggregator failed. And I think there's a new version of it. There's an aggregator 2.0 where somebody provides the aggregation platform for the individual, right? So they don't have to pay a subscription fee to the platform that's aggregating, but through the content that's there, which is totally, there's content there, right? And you can either consume it or not and pay for it or not. And there's actually platforms like this emerging. Have you ever heard of Locals?
No.
There's a guy named Dave Rubin. He's kind of famous. He's got a podcast called The Rubin Report.
I've heard of the Rubin Report. Yeah.
He used to be on the Young Turks. And he's famous for kind of making a flip and being more open-minded, I'd say. But he's still very ideologically aligned with the Young Turks, but finds himself running around in a different circle, right? He created a social network called Locals, and it's that idea that you and I were just talking about. It's the 2.0 version of the aggregator, where Locals, welcomes creators, and I guess you call them influencers, whatever, to go ahead and post content on the platform. You can, have a free and a member section. I'm on Locals. I subscribe to, I follow probably 6 feeds. And really the only reason I'm on there is for the one subscription I pay. And by the way, it's cool with this one person I follow, and I subscribe to. Name your own site starts at $5, and go from there, right? So I subscribe per month, and most of the content is free. I get 95% of the content for free on YouTube. Why do I pay a little bit a month on Locals? There's some value, right? And here's one of the values. He'll put out these little micro lessons, right? Little 1 to 3 minute videos. He'll just pop on and I'll say, hey, here's an example of one. I'll give everybody a free micro lesson. Hey, here's how to turn a bad day into a good day. All right, bad day's going to happen. Well, it's going to be a bad day anyway, so might as well take all the bad things I needed to do, all the things that were going to have bad outcomes and ruin my day, and I've been putting off. Since it's a bad day anyway, might as well just batch them all together and run down the list and make this the bad day of bad days, and we'll put it off for several more weeks or months or whatever, right? And you chuckle at it, but it's true, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
I'm just laughing. I'm just thinking, like, we should just end right here and be like, this whole call was just an endorsement for Locals. And be like, it's only $5 a month.
It's
easy.
Yeah, no,
it's
it is.
easy.
But that's a great micro lesson, right? Like that was worth. And he threw another thing on there which told you why that works, right? It's kind of a provocative. It kind of gets your mind turned on, right? Where you say something like you just said, like, hold on, right? But then he matches it with, the science of persuasion, right? Or the science of influence, why that actually will chemically trigger your brain to behave differently. And you actually really will have a more productive day. You'll get more stuff done. And at the end of the day, you'll be like, I'm ready to go to bed and do this tomorrow, rather than
supplements involved.
No, maybe. I don't know. I mean, depends on what works for you, right? But so anyway, yeah, there's people doing this and they're offering value. And I think it's important that, people don't know about it, right? I don't talk about Locals. I was in my mind, I was like, do I even say Locals? I don't want to sound like I'm endorsing this. So I'm not even going to say who I follow, right? Because that's not what's important here. What's important is there are these things emerging, right? People do have the choice to curate a lot more. And they do have the choice, even if it's just for a little extra nugget of value. That made my day better, right? He doesn't have a bad day every once in a while. It was awesome. It was awesome just to talk about that micro lesson to other people, right? Share that knowledge. It was worth the little bit a month. So no, that's not endorsed Locals. Download Locals.
Actually, I went to the website
Apples.
right now. Yeah. In the whole social arena, I'm not that well versed. As much as I know about technology and computers and even digital marketing, like I'm not on the social marketing front. That's never been my job. It's a whole other career. So whenever people ask me some questions of like, hey, did you hear about this? Or, how do I change my privacy settings in Facebook? I'm like, I don't know. And they say, aren't you a CTO? I'm like, yeah, but I don't know that. I mean, I know how to run a Scrum stand up, but yeah, no, it's just interesting. I there's a lot emerging out there in social networks. Yeah, I see Tulsi Gabbard on there now.
Yeah. Listen, it's interesting, right? I was talking to a friend who, he's got his own story. Maybe we'll get him on the show sometime. But he said to me, it was very revealing. He said to me, hey, it's funny. I finally, started seeing like how I was in this bubble, and, I found myself listening to people I used to disagree with. And, they said something I agree with. I was like, wow, I never thought I'd do that. And I found myself listening to them again, and they'd even say stuff that I would like, that used to get me mad. And it was like, all right, well, I can put that over there, and, I'm here for different entertainment. Right. And it was just interesting to see how there was a little bit of an awakening. Right. But then at the same time, he went and put me in a box and assumed I thought something about something rather than exploring. So, still a little work to do there. But it was great to hear that, somebody who was like, oh my God, I can't believe, and it's just like anger at anything outside the bubble, was finally willing to say, hey, I can step back, make my own choices, and curate my own emotional response. Now we need people to step back, make their own choices, and not curate the disposable response, curate what they allow in, and then the emotional response will match it. Because people, you don't have free will. Sorry. All right, this recording is over.
It isn't merely that your fate depends on whether or not you get your act together and to what degree you decide that you're going to live out your own genuine being. It isn't only your fate. It's the fate of everyone that you're networked with. There's 7 billion people in the world, and who are you? You're just one little dust mote among that 7 billion, and so it really doesn't matter what you do or don't do, but that's simply not the case. It's the wrong model, because you're at the center of a network. You're a node in a network. You're a node in a network. You're a node in a network. Node in a network. You'll know 1,000 people, at least over the course of your life. And they'll know 1,000 people. And that puts you one person away from 1 million, and 2 persons away from 1 billion. And so that's how you're connected. And the things you do, they're like dropping a stone in a pond. The ripples move outward, and they affect things in ways that you can't fully comprehend. And it means that the things that you do and you don't do are far more important than you think. More important than you think. Far more important than you think. The things that you do and you don't do are far more important than you think. The terror of realizing that is that it actually starts to matter what you do. And you might say, well, that's better than living a meaningless existence. It's better for it to matter. But I mean, if you really ask yourself, would you be so sure? The things that you do and you don't do are far more important than you think. More important than you think. Far more important than you think. The things that you do and you don't do are far more important than you think. You had the choice. I can live with no responsibility whatsoever. The price I pay is that nothing matters. Or I can reverse it and everything matters. But I have to take the responsibility that's associated with that. It's not so obvious to me that people would take the meaningful path. Now, when you say, well, nihilists suffer dreadfully because there's no meaning in their life and they still suffer, yeah, but the advantage is they have no responsibility. So that's the payoff, and I actually think that's the motivation. Say, well, I can't help being nihilistic. All my belief systems have collapsed. It's like, yeah, maybe. Maybe you've just allowed them to collapse because it's a hell of a lot easier than acting them out. And the price you pay is some meaningless suffering, but you can always whine about that and people will feel sorry for you, and you have the option of taking the pathway of the martyr, so that's a pretty good deal, all things considered, especially when the alternative is to bear your burden properly and to live forthrightly in the world. If you live a pathological life, you pathologize your society. And if enough people do that, then it's hell. things that you do and you don't do are far more important than you think. More important than you think. Far more important than you think. The things that you do and you don't do are far more important than you think. The things that you do and you don't do are far more important than you think. More important than you think. Far more important than you think. The things that you do and you don't do are far more important than you think. And you can read the Gulag Archipelago and you'll see exactly what hell is like. And then you can decide if that's a place you'd like to visit, or even more importantly, if it's a place you'd like to visit and take all your family and friends. Because that's what happened in the 20th century.